Welcome to Small Bike Stuff. This episode is filmed at Adrenalyn Motorcycles in Mount Maunganui, New Zealand. They have, full disclaimer, I used to work there, but I no longer do and I haven't for quite a while. But they have one of the most impressive two-stroke collections you've ever seen in your life. Not only two-strokes, they've got a ton of Suzukis, a whole bunch of different brands, but there's a lot of Suzukis. So all the three bikes that I filmed here today will be on my channel. There was a Suzuki Van, there was a Suzuki RG50 Walter Wolf edition, and a Suzuki Katana, which is behind me, that has a 252 stroke wedged into the frame. Welcome to this episode of Small Bike Stuff. Today we're having a look at this wonderful creation. Now if you're struggling to figure out exactly what this bike is, let me give you a little bit of a helping hand. A couple of things to identify this model are the wheels. Take a look at the size of that on the front, and we'll get into them more later, but they're worth having a look at now just quickly to identify the model. Have a look at the size of this rear wheel as well. This is a Shinko tire and we're running a 180 by 80 14. That means it's 180mm wide. The height, the profile, is 80% of the first number, and it's 14 inches in diameter. Do you know what bike had the 180 80 14? I can tell you right now, it's the Suzuki Van. The Suzuki Van is a really impressive model that was first created as an RV 50, 75, I believe, and they made a 125. These were made in the 70s, and they were big balloon wheel beach bikes is probably the best way to describe them. Those bikes were popular with the younger crowd and older crowd alike, and Suzuki in the early 2000s decided to make something somewhat similar. Now of course this thing here doesn't really look like a stock Van, and there's a reason for that. But just to give you some brief stats on this bike, we're looking at 125cc 6-speed manual. It's a 4-stroke engine. It's capable of around about 100 kilometers per hour, and this thing has been incredibly customized. So first things first, let's have a look at this engine. So this engine here is a overhead cam 4-stroke. It's a 125cc engine with a carbureted intake, so it's not fuel injected. This thing here does not have a kickstart, it's only electric start. And one thing that's worth noting about this engine is it looks very similar to a lot of Suzuki 4-strokes from the 90s and the early 2000s. We're looking at the Suzuki GM125, the DR125. They have a very similar engine. You've got the oil filter on the side here, 850ml a litre oil capacity. But the big difference with this one is that it's a 6-speed. Now I personally believe they made this bike a 6-speed because of the massive rear tyre, and the 6 gear gives you kind of an ability to have first gear as a super low gear. You can kind of see the gears here, 1 neutral, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in 6 gear, it's not really pulling any harder than it is in 5th, in my personal opinion. And hopefully we can show you that with a bit of a ride. Wheels and tires. So let's start at the back, because this thing is bulbous and very large. Here's my palm of my hand. And you know, it's massive. 180mm wide. 180mm wide is the same as the original Harley Davidson V-Rods that came out. However, they've got an 18-inch tire. So we've got 180mm wide, 80% of that height is the profile, and we've got a 14-inch diameter. This thing has a drum brake on the rear, and the wheel has been refreshed and powder coated, I believe, to look this extra glossy, shiny black. So at the front end, running a 14 on the rear, what are we running on the front? Let's have a look. It's a 130, 80, 18. So 4 inches bigger in diameter, 130mm wide, 80% of that is the height, the profile. And once again, we're running a drum brake on the front as well. If we can get all the way around there, you can see the drum brake. It gives you enough stopping power. Disc is definitely more desirable and probably gives you a bit of a better stop rate, but I don't think there's anything wrong with this in the way it sits. It came out of the factory like this for a reason, and as you can see, it looks the part, but that's because there's a whole bunch of modifications which we'll talk about soon. All right, time to talk about the controls. So we have 2 switch blocks. On the left side we have your high and low beam, your turn signals left and right, and the off button by pushing them in at the center, and you've also got your horn. There is also here a hazard light button, I believe, so that turns all of your turn signals on at the same time. On the right hand side there is a blanking plate here, for which some Suzukis would have had a lights on and lights off button, I imagine, whereas these are always on. You've got an electric start button, and you've also got a kill switch there. Your front brake lever is over there on the right hand side. One thing to note is that this bike cannot be started with the electric start unless you have the clutch depressed. We also have a speedometer here, which is pretty basic. It goes from 0 to 140, that is kilometers per hour. And this bike, as it stands at the moment, is done around 35,800 kilometers. And there is a trip meter down the bottom here, which can be reset. You've got a shifter down here off the left foot peg, and the left foot peg does retract with a spring. So 1 down, 5 up. We have your brake pedal, and the brake pedal is depressed quite easily and returns, and that connects via a long rod through to the rear drum brake. Now, as you can probably see, this thing is not stock. It's had a lot done to it. First things first is the stance of it. You can see the front kind of sits quite a bit higher. The tank is very sloped and purposeful with its mounting position. And then on the rear as well, the guard doesn't look like it did stock. I'll hopefully have a stock one with a photo or a video over the top now, so you can see the difference in comparison with this. So let's start at the top and work our way down. We've got some grips. These grips here are a different style than the original ones. You'll simply just rip the original grips off and throw these ones on. They're on a set of bars that are custom. Now, I don't know what to call this shape. Is it like a Z bar, or is it kind of like a 2? It looks like a number 2 if you go from that way, and then reverse 2 that way. But these bars are custom, and they are slanted forward ever so slightly, because if they were slanted back, I mean, you can look at the angle there, you would have them kind of right in your face. We've got all of this custom metalwork, so as you can see there, you know, that's not an aftermarket finish, that's just the color of the metal, and it looks absolutely fantastic. Coming to the tank, which is the next thing down that we will see, this tank is from yep, you guessed it, that's a Harley-Davidson Sportster tank. So this thing here used to have kind of a boring silver tank that sat quite low slung on the frame, and this tank has given it a real nice stance. One thing with these kind of peanut tanks of the Sportsters is that you really can't make the most of its fuel capacity unless you do a relocation from this to the top, which some people do with kind of Frisco choppers and different Harleys and things like that. So once you get to about this level here, it's full, as it will start to spill out the back of the cap if you're not careful. So it looks the part. You can't fill it up all the way, but you can still get, you know, well over 2/3 of a tank in there quite easily. Coming to the seat. The seat is aftermarket and custom. Quite thin, but it's still got some padding. It's comfortable enough for the purpose of the bike. And I mean, this really, I mean, look at it. This isn't a bike that you're jumping on and taking for a huge ride around the country. I mean, you could, but generally it's just for one person. There's no pillion foot pegs or anything on the rear. And I guess it's just how it sits. Before we look at those wonderful pipes, let's go to the front here. Now, do you know the model, a Honda CR250 two-stroke? There's the forks from one, and they're on this bike. So it's had an aftermarket edition with these forks. They've been made to fit this bike, and it gives it a really, really aggressive stance at the front. They're quite thick, you know, they're not tiny little forks that you see on a lot of bikes of small capacity and good value. From the factory, this thing here had, yeah, forks that definitely weren't as beefy as this. So these things here could be classed as overkill, but I think with the beefed up tank and the fat tires, it's kind of adding to the overall look of the bike and the overall stance. Front guard is custom, once again, wonderful metalwork there. Looks like it's riveted on, if we can get under there, can we? Not really with this camera. So you've got the custom metalwork there, here. Front guard is completely custom. You can have a look at all that work there to mount it and machine it. It's really impressive. So that's all been done by a guy called Gavin Venter. Gavin Venter moved to New Zealand from South Africa, well, maybe 5 years ago now, and he had a shop called Phoenix Customs over in South Africa, and he does a lot of work with Adrenalyn Motorcycles, and in turn created this wonderful machine. So, more custom metalwork there, and this rear guard, which is actually from a Harley-Davidson, I don't know which model, but once again, it adds to that overall finish of the bike. That combined with the real crisp black and like the powder coated wheels or the painted wheels really, really kind of magnify the overall look of the bike. It's just sleek and clean. You've got a single shock in the rear, so it's a monoshock on the rear. And we do have, yes, a custom pipe. Once again, built by Gavin Venter from Phoenix Customs, who works with Adrenalyn Motorcycles all the time. So this was an aftermarket van pipe till about here, where it's been chopped and the rest of it has just been created. So what we've got there is a custom stainless steel pipe, which has been polished within an inch of its life. and it's got 3 exits there. So it does sound fairly loud, and it's a bit raspy, but I think it looks cool. And I think if you're riding a bike like this, you don't really want it to go f. You want to be raspy and have a nice loud rev and announce yourself on arrival to wherever you're going. Negatives about the bike, or things that aren't so great, or things that could be changed? Not much really. I mean, I could sit here and argue that, hey, you can't take a passenger on it and it's not really that useful for riding long distance, but then is it made for that? I don't think it is. So yes, it's not what the Van was, which is kind of like a little bashy dune beach buggy kind of bike. The original Van 125s are the modern versions, these ones here, when they're in stock form, they have kind of a cult following similar to like the Honda Monkey and stuff like that. So I guess that kind of gives you a mindset of what the bike's designed for. But you know, Gavin's added these holes here, speed holes, with wonderful metal kind of grating behind it, and it just really looks the part. You know, we can jump to the other side here and it's all mimicked over on this side. So negatives about the bike, I'm really struggling to find any, to be totally honest with you. I'm going to count now from that end all the way down. So what, we're starting here, 1.
Well, that's not mine, so you can't count that.
Okay, 1.
Well, that's not mine either. But anyway, it's here today. So we'll count what's here today.
Yeah.
So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, it's 21, 19, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 30, 32, 34, 35, 35.
And then 36 outside. There you go.
Nearly 40.
Adrenalyn Motorcycles. Nearly 42 Suzuki, so most of them are 2-stroke.